now tuned into SFTB Africa.
There is a question that South Africans are increasingly being forced to confront. Not because someone asked it directly, but because the national conversation around immigration keeps bringing it back. What does it mean to be African? And how does that identity differ from being South African? Well, at first, South Africa is part of Africa. Being South African should naturally mean being African. Yet the language surrounding immigration suggests something different. As public frustration grows over unemployment, crime, and pressure on public services, the conversation often shifts from we to them. Foreign nationals become outsiders. Neighbors become competitors. And suddenly the idea of African unity feels much further away than the maps suggest. This is not a new debate, but it has become one of the most defining political and cultural conversations in South Africa today. Across the country, anti-immigration movements have gained momentum. Many South Africans argue that undocumented migration places additional strain on healthcare, housing, education, and employment. These concerns are genuine and deserve serious discussion. Every sovereign nation has the right to secure its borders and enforce its immigration laws. But somewhere along the way, two very different conversations become one. The first is about immigration policy, the second is about identity. They are not the same. A government can't strengthen border management without encouraging hostility towards people. Likewise, supporting African solidarity does not mean advocating for open borders. Both ideas can exist at the same time. Perhaps the real question isn't whether South Africa should control immigration. It should. The real question is whether we have begun confusing undocumented migration with the identity of Africans themselves. The distinction is what matters, because much of the hostility we witness is directed not at foreigners in general, but at fellow Africans, Zimbabweans, Mozambicans, Ethiopians, Somalis, Congolese nationals, Nigerians. This is why some scholars prefer the term Afrophobia over xenophobia. The issue is not simply a fear of foreigners, it is often hostility directed towards specific Africans. That presents an uncomfortable contradiction. South Africa has long presented itself as a champion of African cooperation. Our businesses operate across the continent, our musicians collaborate across borders. Our universities welcome students from neighboring countries. We celebrate continental sporting competitions and speak proudly about Africa's future. Yet during periods of economic hardship, that shared identity becomes more fragile. The question becomes less about being African and more about protecting what is South African. To understand why, we need to look at the role of borders. Today, borders feel permanent. Passports determine where we can live, work, and vote. Citizenship grants rights and that non-citizens do not have. That is how modern states function. But Africa's borders were not always there. As you know, the Berlin Conference took place, and European colonial powers divided the continent with little regard for existing communities, languages, or trade networks. Communities that lived together for generations suddenly found themselves separated by political boundaries that they had no role in creating. Those borders eventually became independent states. South Africa became South Africa, Zimbabwe became Zimbabwe, Mozambique became Mozambique. Legally, those borders matter. Culturally, the story is more complex. Languages, tradition, and families continue to extend beyond national boundaries. Our histories are deeply interconnected. This is the foundation upon which Pan-Africanism was built. Leaders like Kwame Nkrumah envisioned an Africa strengthened by cooperation rather than division. In South Africa, Thabo Mbeki's famous I Am an African speech challenged citizens to recognize that South Africa's history cannot be erased or rather separated from the history of the continent itself. But ideals are often tested during these difficult times. South Africa's economy continues to struggle with high unemployment, slow growth, and persistent inequality. In these conditions, immigration has increasingly become part of the conversation. Some argue migrants take jobs, others argue they increase pressure on public services. These concerns deserve evidence-based discussions rather than emotional slogans. Research consistently shows that migration is a complex economic issue, while undocumented migration presents real governance challenges. Experts caution against treating migrants as the primary cause of unemployment or crime. South Africa's economic challenges are rooted in multiple structural factors, including slow economic growth, inequality, governance failures, and limited job creation. Blaming migrants alone risks simplifying problems that have developed over decades. At the same time, dismissing public concerns altogether is equally unhelpful. Citizens have every right to expect government to manage borders effectively and enforce immigration law fairly. Security and compassion are not opposites. A country can protect its borders while protecting human dignity. Perhaps that balance is where South Africa's future lies. Because this debate ultimately asks something much bigger than whether immigration should be tighter or more open. It asks who we believe belongs here. Can we defend our national interests without abandoning our continental identity? Can patriotism and Pan-Africanism exist together? I believe they can. Being proudly South African doesn't require rejecting Africa, and embracing Africa does not require ignoring the responsibilities of citizenship. The two identities were never meant to compete. One tells us where we belong legally, the other reminds us where we belong historically, culturally, and geographically. Perhaps the greatest challenge facing South Africa is not choosing between being African and being South African. Perhaps it is recognizing that our futures depend on understanding both. Because borders may define our states, but they should never define the limits of our humanity. I am Kananelo Quintus Yamahali, the man on the mic, and this has been another episode exploring the social and political issues shaping South Africa here at SFTB Africa. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and keep the conversation going.